I was 22 when I realized my entire life story fit inside one cardboard box at the top of my parents' closet, and most of it I'd never been told. I came home for the first time in almost a year because my parents had finally decided to sell the house. They talked about it for ages. Too big, too expensive, too many stairs for my dad's knees, but I never actually believed they would do it. This was the house where my height marks still climbed the kitchen doorway, where every wall had a nail hole from some old school project or Christmas decoration. Now there were empty spots on the walls and freshly patched plaster, and the whole place smelled like paint instead of food and laundry detergent. "Don't get sentimental," my mom said, though her voice wobbled. "We're just moving 10 minutes away." I dropped my duffel bag by the door. "You've been saying that since I was 12. She made a face at me and brushed a bit of hair out of my eyes the way she always did, like I was still a kid. Her fingers smelled faintly of bleach. "Your father's in the garage, trying to murder himself under a mountain of extension cords," she said. "Go rescue him while I start the paperwork." By paperwork, she meant the stack of forms from the real estate agent. I knew, because they were spread all over the kitchen table. And like always, there was a sticky note on top in her handwriting. "Please read and explain." My mom hates forms. That's what I grew up thinking. She'd say things like, "My eyes hurt," or "The print's too small," and push anything with more than 2 lines of text toward me or my dad. It was our running joke. She cooked, we read. She fixed hems, we filled in boxes. But now that the house was actually getting sold, the notes seemed to multiply. One on the table, one on the envelope from the bank, one taped to a letter from the insurance company. I noticed, but I didn't really think about it. Not yet. The garage looked like an explosion in a hardware store. My dad was on a step stool trying to yank a dusty Christmas wreath off a nail, while 3 different extension cords wrapped around his ankles like snakes. "Careful," I said. "You break a hip, the buyers are going to ask for a discount." He snorted. "That's the plan. Maybe they'll pay extra to keep the antique husband." I untangled the cords, listening to the soft static of the old radio he always kept on some classic rock station. It was comforting and sad at the same time, like everything else that weekend. "So this is really happening," I said finally. "You're selling." "Apparently," he said. The word came out like he'd just bitten into something sour. "Your mother decided. You're the one with the knee that screams during stairs," I reminded him. "Yeah, well," he muttered. "Stairs don't nag?" I laughed and he smiled a little, but his eyes were tired. It dawned on me then that my parents suddenly looked older than the house. Maybe they always had. I'd just been too busy leaving to notice. We worked in silence for a while, sorting things into piles. Keep, donate, trash. Every now and then he'd hand me something and say, "Remember this?" And I usually did. The unicorn bike helmet I refused to take off for a year. The science fair volcano that had permanently stained the garage floor red. Then he handed me a small cardboard box, the kind that used to hold printer paper. "Your mom said this is yours," he said. "From when you were little. Take it upstairs, go through it later. Whatever you don't want, toss." He climbed back onto the step stool before I could ask anything else. The box was heavier than it looked. Someone had written my name on the side in thick black marker, M-A-Y-A. The letters were a little crooked, like whoever wrote them wasn't used to writing much. I carried it up to my old room, which felt like a crime scene. The shelves were bare. The bed was just a mattress with a fitted sheet. Even the posters had been taken down, leaving squares of unfaded paint like ghosts. The box went onto the bed with a solid thump. I sat cross-legged and lifted the lid. On top were things I recognized immediately, my kindergarten handprint in cracked blue paint, a first-place ribbon from some long-ago spelling bee, the pink plastic tiara I'd worn to someone's birthday party and refused to give back. Under that, there were photographs. Lots of them. Loose and curling, some stuck together at the edges. I picked up a random one. Baby me in a bathtub, grinning. Hair slicked into a foamy mohawk. My dad's hands in the frame, holding me up. Another. Toddler me on my mom's hip, her face buried in my neck, like she was breathing me in. She looked younger, but not young. There were already lines around her eyes. And then I saw it. A picture I'd never seen before. It was a hospital photo, the kind nurses take with those disposable cameras. The colors were washed out, the lighting bad. But I could still make out the metal rails of an incubator, the blue blanket, the tiny fists. There were 2 babies in the photograph. One lay curled on the left, mouth open in a cry you couldn't hear. The other was on the right, maybe sleeping, maybe just still. Both wore those little striped hospital caps. On the edge of the incubator, someone had taped 2 labels. My stomach did a weird flip. The left one had my last name, and under baby's name it said, Maya B. The right label said the same last name. Under baby's name, someone had scrawled Lena A. I stared at the letters until they blurred. Lena. I said it out loud. The syllables felt unfamiliar and familiar at the same time, like a word from a language I used to know as a kid. Why had no one ever shown me this? I dug deeper into the box, moving aside old report cards and birthday cards. Underneath it all, I found a small plastic baggie. Inside was a tiny hospital bracelet. The elastic was yellowed with age. The tag was cracked. Across the faded label, in blue ink, it said, Maya, twin B. The world went very, very quiet. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for my legs to fall asleep and my back to start aching. Long enough for the house sounds to change, the rumble of the garage door, the clatter of pans in the kitchen, my parents' voices drifting up like background noise. Twin B. I'd never, not once, heard the word twin used about me. I picked up the hospital photo again. On the back, someone had written a date, my birthday, and 2 weights, one slightly heavier than the other. There was a little heart next to each. My chest hurt. Finally I stood up, knees popping, and walked downstairs. My mom was at the kitchen table, paper spread around her like a paper snowstorm. Reading glasses perched on her nose, pen unused in her hand. She looked up when I came in, automatically reaching to sweep her hair back, even though it was already tied. The hospital bracelet lay cold in my fist. Hey, she said, forcing brightness. Did you find anything good? Your ballet recital program? Those awful bangs you gave yourself. I put the bracelet on the table. Her smile died in slow motion. For a second she just stared at it, like she didn't recognize what it was. Then her face crumpled in the strangest way, lips trembling, eyes wide, hand flying to her chest. Where did you? Her voice cracked. She cleared her throat. Where did you get that? In the box, I said. My voice sounded flat in my own ears. With my name on it. She swallowed. Her eyes were shiny. You weren't supposed to see that. What is it? I held up the bracelet, so the plastic tag twisted and caught the light. What does Twinbee mean? Who's Lena? My dad walked in then, wiping grease off his hands with a rag. He stopped short when he saw the bracelet, like he'd hit an invisible wall. Martha, he said to my mom, but his eyes were on me. You didn't. She found the box, my mom whispered. They looked at each other, saying a whole conversation with their eyes. I hated it when they did that, talked around me instead of to me. Can someone please? I said, my voice rising. Tell me what the hell is going on? My mom flinched at the swear, which, under other circumstances, I would have been petty enough to enjoy. Not now. She sank into the chair, both hands flat on the table like she needed to hold on to something. You had a sister, she said. A twin. Her name was Elena. We called her Lena. The words floated in the air between us, unreal. My mom's voice wavered. She lived for 3 days. My knees went weak. I grabbed the back of a chair to steady myself. No, I said automatically. I'm an only child. My dad made a painful sound, something between a sigh and a groan. He pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. You're our only child now, he said quietly. They told me the story in pieces, like they physically couldn't make themselves say it all at once. We sat there for almost an hour without moving much. The late afternoon light slid across the floor, turning things orange, then gold, then gray. My mom talked with her hands clenched in her lap. My dad talked while staring at a water stain on the ceiling. I was born early, they said. Weeks early. They'd known there were 2 babies from the first ultrasound, but they didn't realize how small and fragile we would be. The doctor had used words like high risk and NICU and ventilator, but back then they were just sounds. My parents were older even then. My mom was 39, my dad 44. Everyone told them they were crazy to try for a baby. We weren't trying, my mom said, giving my dad a sad, crooked smile. We just stopped trying not to. When her contractions started, They raced to the hospital. There was fear, panic, rushed nurses. They took you both out so fast, my dad said. There was blood everywhere, and then they were gone. Just gone. No one even let us hold you. I tried to picture it. Two tiny babies pulled into the bright, cold world while my parents waited in some hallway, hollow and useless. You and Lena were in the NICU, my mom said. Tubes and wires, all these machines. You were so small. I didn't know how anyone that small could live. But I did, I said. She nodded, eyes brimming. You did. You screamed the whole time, which was oddly reassuring. Lena, my dad swallowed hard. Lena had trouble breathing from the start. They said her lungs weren't developed enough. They kept adjusting the machines, but she just never stabilized. On the third day, the machine stopped making a difference. The doctor asked if we wanted to hold her, my mom said, voice barely audible. Until then, we only got to touch her hand through the little hole in the incubator. She stared at the bracelet like it was something dangerous. We sat in a rocking chair, she whispered. They wrapped her in this white blanket, and for 30 minutes she was just a baby, not a patient, just our little girl. And then, her shoulders shook. My dad reached across the table and put his hand over hers. And then it was just you, he said to me. The silence after that felt like another person in the room. You should have told me, I said finally. My voice sounded very far away. My mom wiped at her face with the heel of her hand. We tried, she said. At first. We thought we would. We kept her things. The pictures. That bracelet. We said, when Maya is older, we'll show her. We'll tell her she had a sister. But every time your birthday came around, my dad added, your mom would shut down. Or I would. We'd plan to do something on the actual date, and then we'd wake up and neither of us could get out of bed. So we started moving the party, my mom said. First it was just one day earlier. Then a weekend. Then we just never said why. I asked your grandmother to keep the box, my dad said. We thought out of sight, out of mind. But she kept it for you. So I would find it by accident. I asked. My voice was sharp enough to cut. That was the plan. No, my mom said quickly. We didn't have a plan. That was the problem. We pushed it aside and told ourselves we were protecting you. From what? My hands were shaking now. From knowing my sister existed? From knowing you lost a child? From growing up thinking you were the reason she didn't, my dad said quietly. That shut me up. He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw how tired he was. How many nights he must have lain awake next to my mom, both of them staring at the ceiling, thinking about a crib that wasn't there. You were so sick at first, he said. So fragile. Tubes and IVs. We kept thinking, what if she died too? What if we lost both of you? Then when you got stronger, we were terrified you'd feel guilty for being the one who made it. You were our miracle, my mom whispered. We didn't want your life to be a monument to our grief. I didn't know what to say to that. My breath came in shallow little bursts. There was a roaring sound in my ears. For 22 years I'd moved through the world as an only child, center of my parents' orbit. Now, suddenly, there was a ghost standing just behind me in every memory, a second baby that never got to grow up, a name that never got called for dinner. I thought of all the times I'd screamed, "You're smothering me!" when my mom insisted on walking me to school, or of my dad waiting in the car until my concert finished, even when I'd said, "Just go home, I'll get a ride." They weren't just overprotective. They were trying to keep their remaining child alive. Okay, I said eventually, because there was nothing else to say. Okay. It didn't mean I was okay, but it was all I had. That night I slept badly, drifting in and out of dreams where I kept turning a corner and seeing myself, only not me, because the other girl's hair was slightly darker, or her smile crooked in the opposite direction. I tried to talk to her, but my mouth wouldn't open. When I woke, the house was quiet. Too quiet. No radio, no clatter of dishes. I pattered down the hallway and peeked into my parents' room. The bed was made, which meant they'd been up for hours. In the kitchen, a half-empty coffee mug sat by an open notebook. There were little scribbles in the margin, my mom's handwriting, round and wobbly. The pages themselves, though, were blank. The real estate forms were stacked neatly on the other side of the table. The top one had sticky notes all over it. Explain this. What does this mean? Can they cheat us? My mom was nowhere in sight. I wandered into the living room and stopped. She was sitting on the couch, back very straight, hands clenched around her phone. The TV was on some daytime talk show, muted. She looked like a person waiting to get a shot. "Hey," I said softly. She jumped a little. "Oh, Maya, I thought you were sleeping." "I was. For a bit." I sank into the armchair opposite. "Where's Dad?" "Hardware store," she said. "He decided we need a new wrench. We already own like 9. She gave me a brittle half-smile. "Then he'll make it 10. We sat in awkward silence for a moment. On the coffee table was an envelope from the bank. It was unopened. I tapped it lightly. "You know I can help with this, right?" I said. "With the forms. If you want." My mom's jaw clenched. "I know you can," she said. "You and your father, always reading everything, telling me where to sign." The way she said it stung, like reading was something we did to spite her. "You could read them too," I said carefully. Her eyes flashed up to mine, then away. "I read plenty," she said. "Cookbooks. Labels." "Mom." I reached for the envelope. She grabbed it first, fingers white. "Don't," she said sharply. "Just don't." I froze. The room suddenly felt much smaller. "Okay," I said slowly. "I'm not trying to attack you. You think I'm stupid," she blurted. Her voice cracked on the last word. "What?" "No. Of course not." She laughed, a jagged, humorless sound. "You always have, since you were little. Since you learned to read, and I couldn't help with your homework. Since I signed the wrong line on that field trip form, and the teacher had to send it back." "Mom, I was 8, I said. "I don't even remember that." "I do," she whispered. She pressed the heel of her hand to her forehead like she had a headache. "I never learned," she said. "Not properly. Not like you. I can sound things out if I go slow and the letters are big. But this," she gestured vaguely at the pile of forms, "this is another language." It felt like the floor shifted under me. I'd always known my mom hated reading. I thought it was a personality quirk, like people who hate mushrooms or heights. I never once considered that she literally couldn't. "What happened?" I asked. She shrugged one shoulder, small and helpless. "Small town," she said. "Bad school. Your grandmother was sick a lot. Your grandfather drank a lot. I missed days. Then weeks. By the time anyone noticed I could barely keep up, they just passed me along anyway. Said I was slow, but not special ed slow. So," she made a vague motion, like shooing something away. "Work it out in life, Martha." I pictured my mom as a little girl, sitting in the back of a noisy classroom, pretending to read along while the teacher droned, the letters on the board just shapes. "I learned the important stuff," she said defensively. "Street signs, prices, how to write my name. But real reading. Books, contracts." She shook her head. "Your father tried to teach me when we were first married. I'd see the look on his face when I messed up the same word 6 times, and I'd just stop. That's not." I started, but she cut me off. "He never said anything mean," she said. "That's almost worse. He'd just read for me, and I'd sign, and we built a life that way. Then you came, and suddenly there were forms for everything. Doctor visits, prescriptions, school, all those letters in your backpack." A memory surfaced. Me at the kitchen table with a crumpled flyer for the book fair, my mom waving it toward my dad when he got home. "Can you see if this costs anything?" She'd said, "If it does, just circle the cheap ones." I told myself you didn't need to see me struggle, she said now. That you'd think it was embarrassing. So I turned it into a joke. "Your mom's old. Her eyes are bad. You kids do the reading." My chest tightened with guilt. How many times had I sighed dramatically when she'd shoved something at me? How many times had I rolled my eyes when she'd asked, "What does this say again?" "Why didn't you say something?" I asked quietly. "What was I supposed to say?" she snapped, then immediately softened. "Sorry. By the time you were old enough to understand, you were already reading novels in the back seat. I felt like a 6-year-old next to you." She let out a long breath. "Do you know why I took that job at your grade school?" she asked. "To spy on me?" I tried to joke, but it came out weak. "To clean classrooms after hours," she said. "And because the principal let me sit in the hallway when the reading specialist worked with you." I blinked. "What?" You were having trouble in 2nd grade, remember? Mixing up letters. They thought you might be dyslexic. Her mouth twisted. Turns out you just read too fast for your own good. But for a while they had you in that little room by the office, reading out loud with Miss Peters. I remember the rectangular room with the cheerful posters and the old rug. I remembered feeling embarrassed walking in, like it was a punishment. I'd come early for my shift and sit outside the door with my mop bucket, Mom said, pretending to tidy the bulletin boards. She tapped her ear. I listened to every lesson, every sound it out, every trick she taught you. She gave a small, embarrassed laugh. Half of the words I know now, I learned from your tutoring sessions. My throat felt thick. So yes, she finished quietly. I need you to read the forms. I wish I didn't. I wish I could march into that bank and tell them exactly what to do with their interest rate. But I can't. And every time I have to ask you or your father for help, it feels like the part of me that's still 8 years old is standing in front of the whole class, trying to read and failing. I crossed the room before I'd even decided to move. She flinched when I knelt in front of her, like she expected me to yell. Instead, I took her hands. They were cold and squeezed. I don't think you're stupid, I said. My voice shook. I think you've been doing the hardest part of life without the right tools, and that's terrifying. I'm sorry if I ever made you feel less for that. She swallowed. Oh, honey, you were a kid. You didn't know. I do now, I said. And if you want, we can fix some of it. Not everything, but some. She looked wary. What do you mean? I picked up her notebook from the table, flipped past the blank page to a fresh one, and wrote in big block letters. House sale questions. Underneath I wrote, interest rate, closing costs, fixed, variable. Step 1, I said. I explain what these mean. In words, not just on the forms. Step 2, we call the bank together. You listen. You ask questions if you want. Step 3, I smiled a little. We get you a library card that isn't just for checking out cookbooks. She snorted, half laughing, half crying. Those cookbooks kept you fed, she said. I know, I said. And I'm grateful. Now let's see what else a few pages can do. Her fingers tightened on mine. For the first time in a long time, she looked hopeful. It was a fragile kind of hope, like a candle in a drafty room. Okay, she whispered. Okay. We spent most of that day with our heads bent over paperwork. I circled paragraphs, drew little arrows, wrote simple explanations in the margins in block letters big enough for her to read easily. Anytime she stumbled on a word, we broke it into parts, just like Miss Peters used to do with me. It was weird and sweet and a bit painful, teaching my own mother to read the way someone had once taught me. At one point she laughed and said, "Look at us, the blind leading the blind." And I said, "No, this is one of those 3-legged races." And we both laughed until we cried. When Dad came home, arms full of unnecessary wrenches, he stopped in the doorway watching us. "You two look dangerous," he said. "Be afraid," my mom said without looking up. "I'm learning how to read contracts. Your days of hiding junk purchases are numbered." He grinned, but his eyes were shiny. He went to the sink and busied himself rinsing an already clean mug like he needed an excuse to look away. Later, after dinner, they sent me to the store to pick up some boxes and packing tape. It was dark by then, the air cold enough that my breath puffed out in little clouds. On the way back, I stopped at the red light by the old strip mall. Across the street was the elementary school where my mom had clean classrooms. The windows were dark now, but I could almost see tiny me hunched over a book in that little room off the office, and the shadow of my mom in the hallway, straining to hear every word. "You weren't alone," I said out loud to my car to the dark. "You just didn't know I was there." It struck me then how many secrets a family could hold without being malicious. My parents hadn't lied about Lena or my mom's illiteracy to hurt me. They were just scared and ashamed and human. But it didn't change the fact that there was still more I didn't know. Because in the box from the closet, under the baby photos and the hospital bracelet, there had been something else. A letter, folded and refolded, so many times the paper was soft. I hadn't opened it yet. I'd slipped it into my pocket before going downstairs about Lena. Through all the crying and talking with my parents, I'd forgotten it was even there. Now, sitting at the red light, I slid my hand into my coat and felt the crackle. The light turned green. I drove home. I read the letter in my room that night with the door closed, the only light coming from the lamp on my desk. It felt like the kind of thing that needed a contained space, like letting smoke out of a jar. The envelope had my mother's name on it in unfamiliar handwriting, dated a few months before I was born. Inside was a single page. I recognized the letterhead from some vague childhood memory, the county social services office. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Price, it began. This letter is to confirm that your application to adopt an infant has been accepted. My heart did that weird, stuttering thing again. I read the paragraph twice, then 3 times. My parents had applied to adopt a baby. Me. And then I'd been born, biological after all. Which meant there was a second page, handwritten. Different ink, more jagged strokes. It took me a minute to realize it was my dad's writing. Martha, it said, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. You're still in the hospital. The doctors keep saying they don't know yet. The people from the agency keep calling. They want an answer about the baby. They say he'll be better off with a family who can give him everything. I keep looking at your face and thinking, we are his family. But then I look at the bills on the counter and the oxygen machine by your bed, and I wonder if we are being selfish. I don't know how we can take both babies, especially if neither of them makes it. I feel like a monster even writing that. A father is supposed to want all his children, no matter what. But I am so scared, Martha. I am scared of losing you. I am scared of losing them. I am scared of keeping one and giving up the other, and having to look that child in the eye in 20 years and say, we chose you. Or worse, we didn't. I keep thinking of something the nurse said when she thought I wasn't listening. Sometimes the body makes choices the heart can't. If one of the twins, if one doesn't make it, maybe that's our answer. Maybe it's cruel to even think that. I don't know. I just know that I already love them both, and I am already failing them. If you decide we keep the adoption, I will follow you. If you decide to say no, I will follow you. If you decide to run out of this hospital with both babies tucked under your coat like stolen goods, I will follow you there too. Just please don't hate me for being afraid. Love, Tom. My dad's name. I stared at the letter until the words swam. There was so much in there that my brain couldn't process all at once, like trying to swallow an entire loaf of bread without chewing. They had planned to adopt a baby boy, somewhere out there. At the same time, my mom was pregnant, maybe unexpectedly, maybe miraculously. Then there were 2 of us. Then there was 1. I tried to imagine my dad sitting in some hospital cafeteria with bad coffee, scribbling this letter to my mom while she lay in a bed hooked up to monitors. If one of the twins, if one doesn't make it, maybe that's our answer. I folded the pages back along their existing creases and sat there, breathing shallowly. My life had almost been someone else's, not just Lena's, the baby boy from the agency. My parents had been hovering over 3 different futures, not knowing which one they'd be allowed to keep. The letter didn't mention what they'd ultimately decided about the adoption. I had a feeling I knew, but I also had a feeling the story didn't end there. I tucked the letter under my pillow like a kid hiding a diary and lay awake a long time, listening to the house creak. The next morning, I woke to the smell of bacon and the sound of my parents arguing in low voices downstairs. Not a good idea, my dad was saying. She's already in it, my mom replied. We can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, Tom. I slid out of bed and tiptoed to the stairs. She just learned she had a twin, Dad said. She's got enough to process without adding. She will find out sooner or later. Mom cut in. You know that. She always finds everything. There was a clink of ceramic. I pictured her setting a mug down too hard. I'm tired of her getting the truth in pieces. She deserves the whole story. My dad sighed, long and heavy. Then you tell her, he said. My throat still hurts from yesterday. I will, she said. But I want you there. I backed up a few steps and made some extra noise coming down, so they wouldn't know I'd been listening. My mom was at the stove, flipping pancakes. My dad sat at the table reading the back of a cereal box like it contained state secrets. Morning, I said. You're up, Mom said unnecessarily. Smell bacon, I said. Thought maybe a burglar broke in and started cooking. Finally, a useful burglar, Dad muttered. We ate mostly in silence, with only occasional stabs at normal conversation. How's school? Did you talk to your roommate? Don't forget to get your oil changed before you drive back. I waited them out. Eventually, my mom set down her fork and folded her hands. "There's more," she said. Dad made a faint "oh God" noise. I put my fork down too. My heart kicked up a gear. "More what?" I asked. "More dead siblings? Are we collecting them now?" "Don't joke," Mom said sharply, then winced, as if scolding me felt wrong given everything. "It's not another dead baby," Dad said. Look, remember your cousin Nate? From Ohio?" I asked. "The one who came for Christmas when I was 10 and beat me at Mario Kart?" "That's the one," he said. "What about him?" Mom took a deep breath. "He's not your cousin," she said. "He's your brother." The word hit me like cold water. For a moment I was sure I'd misheard. "What?" "Biologically," Dad said quickly. "On your mother's side." Mom shot him a look. "That makes him her brother in every way that matters." Yes, he said. "I'm just trying to be precise." "My brother," I repeated. "How? What?" My mother's face had gone pale, but her voice, when she spoke, was weirdly calm, like someone reciting a story they'd practiced. "Nate is the baby from the letter you found," she said. "The adoption agency won." I stared. "You adopted him?" "Before me." She shook her head. "We were going to. That was the plan. But then I found out I was pregnant. With you and Lena. And the doctor said it was a high-risk pregnancy. Suddenly we were going from 0 kids to maybe 3, or maybe none." She reached for my hand across the table. I let her take it, fingers limp. "When Lena died and you were still in the NICU," she said, the agency called again. "They said the baby boy we'd been matched with was ready to be placed. They needed an answer." My dad rubbed his forehead. "We were drowning," he said. "Your mom was recovering from surgery. You were in an incubator with tubes, and nobody could tell us if you'd come home. And this woman from the agency is on the phone saying he needs a family now." "We asked if there was another couple," Mom said. "They said yes, but they were older, and the house was smaller, and their income wasn't as high, and—" "In other words," Dad said bitterly, "they weren't as good as us on paper. We had to choose," Mom said. "Take him and hope you made it, or say no and hope they found him somewhere else to go." Her voice broke. "I couldn't do it," she whispered. "I couldn't sign on to be responsible for 2 babies when I didn't even know if you were going to live. So we told them no." She swallowed. "A month later, my sister called," she said. "She told me they'd been matched with a baby boy through the same agency. His name was Nate." I blinked. "Aunt Sharon," I said slowly, "adopted the baby you were supposed to adopt." Mom nodded. "We never told her that part. We let her be excited. She couldn't have kids of her own. It felt like the universe had redirected him. We met him when he was 6 months old," Dad said. "Your grandmother kept saying how much he looked like you did as a baby. I thought she was just being sentimental." "He did look like you," Mom said. "He still does. The agency must have decided it was simpler to keep him in the extended family. No messy cross-state stuff. I don't know." I sat back, dizzy. "So, Nate is my cousin and my brother," I said. "In a way," Dad said. "He's our almost son. The one who almost lived here instead of there. If things had gone differently," Mom added softly, "you might have grown up in that little house in Ohio, and he might have been the one sitting at this table. It was too much. Too many sliding doors. Too many parallel universes." "And Lena?" I asked. "Where does she fit into all this cosmic game of musical chairs?" My mother flinched, but she didn't look away. "She's the reason we didn't take Nate," she said quietly. "If she had lived, if both of you had, the decision would have made itself. We couldn't handle 3 infants, not at our age, not with our money. The agency would have found another family. But because she died," I said slowly, "you decided not to take him anyway." "We decided to keep breathing," Dad said. "It was all we could manage. We chose you because you were already ours and already hanging on by a thread." He looked at me, eyes pleading. "It wasn't about loving one of you more. It was about survival." "What about Nate?" I asked. "Does he know?" They exchanged a look. It was different from the look the day before, not conspiratorial, more hesitant. "Sharon knows some of it," Mom said. "She knows we were also in the process, that we were matched with a baby before my pregnancy. She doesn't know he was the same baby. We never had the courage to say it out loud. Nate doesn't know it all, Dad said. As far as he's concerned, he's just your cousin from Ohio. I tried to picture his face at 10, concentrating on the video game controller. I remembered thinking we looked alike, but I chalked it up to generic family resemblance. Now I saw my own jawline, my own worry crease between his eyebrows. So there's a twin I never met, I said slowly. A brother who could have been my brother in this house but grew up 2 states away. And parents who never finished high school but worked themselves to death so I could go to college and act like I knew everything. Tears pricked my eyes. I pressed my palms against them until stars burst in the dark. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel, I said. Grateful? Guilty? Angry? Yes, Dad said simply. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. Great. I'll just feel everything then. Whatever you feel is okay, Mom said. You're not wrong for being mad. You're not wrong for being sad. We should have told you earlier. She gestured helplessly. We were afraid of losing you. In every way. I thought of my mom sitting outside my reading lessons, learning silently. My dad writing panicked letters to her in hospital cafeterias. My sister Elena, whose entire life could be measured in hours, not years. Nate, playing Mario Kart with me while our parents exchanged tight smiles behind us. We can't fix what we did, Dad said. We can only tell you the truth now and hope you don't walk out the door and never come back. I'm not going to do that, I said, surprised to realize I meant it. Why not? He asked. Because, I said slowly, for better or worse, you're my people. And apparently I'm the only one in this family who knows how to read fine print. Dad barked out a laugh that turned into a sniffle. Mom let out a long breath I hadn't realized she'd been holding for years. So what do we do now? I asked. Mom squeezed my hand. Whatever you want, she said. We can pretend this never happened. We can call your cousin. We can burn that box. We can keep the bracelet on the mantle. It's your story as much as ours now. For the first time since opening the box, I felt something other than shock or grief. I felt agency. I want to meet Nate, I said. Really meet him. Not just as a cousin. I don't know if we tell him everything yet, but I want to know who he is. Mom nodded slowly. Okay, and I want a picture of Lena, I added. Not the incubator one. A real one. If you have it. Mom's eyes filled instantly. We do, she said. Your grandmother made us a little album. We haven't opened it in years. Maybe it's time, I said. Dad nodded. And what about? He gestured toward the stack of forms on the counter. I looked at my mom. She looked back at me, chin lifting slightly. We finished learning to read them, she said. Together. The rest of that week blurred into little scenes that, if you stitched them all together, would probably add up to an hour of quiet, ordinary miracles. Mom and I at the kitchen table, her tracing each word with her finger while I sounded it out beside her. Dad bringing us tea and pretending not to eavesdrop. Me on a video call with Nate, asking about his job, his city, his favorite childhood memories. Watching him wrinkle his nose, exactly like mine when he laughed. Mom digging out a small, worn photo album from the back of her dresser. Inside were 3 pictures of Lena, 1 in the NICU, 2 in my mother's arms. In one, my dad's hand was in the frame, fingers large against the tiny back. We cried over them, but it wasn't the kind of crying that left you hollow. It was like finally taking a splinter out of a wound that had festered too long. On my last night before going back to school, I sat at the dinner table with my parents and made them practice reading the menu from the takeout place down the street. Mom stumbled over teriyaki and then repeated it until she had it perfect. Dad had trouble with jalapeno and wrote it down phonetically, jalapeno, on a sticky note just to make us laugh. After we ate, Mom disappeared into her room and came back with 2 cupcakes from the bakery downtown. One had a little M drawn in icing. The other had an L. I can't believe they didn't ask questions when I requested that, she said, voice wobbling. We turned off the kitchen lights and lit the candles. For a moment the 3 flames wavered there, mine, my parents', and the one for the girl who never got to see birthdays. We sang softly. My mom's voice cracked halfway through, but she kept going. When it was time to blow them out, I looked at the cupcake with the L, at my parents' faces in the candlelight, at the shadows on the walls of the house we were about to leave. For Lena, I said. For all the things you couldn't say. And for the things we're finally saying now. We blew them out together. It will probably take me years to untangle how I feel about all of it. Some days I still get angry when I think about the secrets, the choices made without me. Some nights I lie awake picturing Nate in a crib that could have been mine, or Lena in a world that never let her leave the hospital. But other days, I look at my mom sounding out the instructions on a pill bottle and my dad reading a manual with her instead of for her, and I feel something else. Grateful, yes. Sad always, but also strangely grounded. My family story isn't neat. It's messy and patched together with fear and love, and bad decisions and better ones that came too late. It's written in hospital ink and social worker files, and my father's shaky letters, and my mother's belated attempts at literacy. For most of my life, they tried to keep me from reading it. Now, finally, they've handed me the pages. And for the first time, I'm not afraid of what I'll find between the lines.